How's it going, YouTube? And welcome to another episode of Game Day Feast. Today, believe it or not, we're going vegetarian, and we're going to be making some quesadillas with black beans and red onion, and some cheese, as well as two different salsas, a tomatillo salsa and a tomato salsa. And I figured today I was going to go vegetarian as a little bit of a thank you to a really cool person that I met on Instagram, actually, not YouTube. I'm talking to YouTube, right? Her name's Kae Cee, and she's got Kae Cee's Vegetarian Kitchen. You can follow her on Instagram. She's got a YouTube channel, and she's actually across the pond over in the UK. And she's been wonderful. We met up when I was first starting the show, and we've been talking a little bit back and forth, and I figured today, since she's got Kae Cee's Vegetarian Kitchen, I'd go vegetarian as a thank you for her. So what we're doing here is we're going to be dicing up some red onion, which of course the skin is not behaving for me at the moment. And we're going to do an entire red onion because today we're going to use it in a lot of different applications, in the salsas. So figure what we'll end up doing here is making sure we have enough and we don't have to keep chopping onion throughout the entirety of the prep. So what we're going to do is take a nice sharp knife. We have the onion halved and peeled. We're going to slice through the onion, right? And we want these decently thin for what we're going to be doing, right? And we'll probably go through 3 times. And this is the perfect way to dice or mince an onion. Then we're going to take the blade, and we have these nice slices here. We're going to turn it toward me with the root end away from me. And we're just going to slice vertically, probably 1/4 to 1/2 inch slices, right? But we don't want to go through the back of the onion. We want the entire thing to basically stay in one nice piece. So I turn the root end away from me, and then we're just going to slice through, and we're going to get this beautiful little diced onion. You can see the onion staining my hands already, right? So we're going to chop through, right? We don't need to be fast about it, right? It's Game Day Feast, not a professional kitchen. Perfect. Cool. And we're just going to take the root end and discard that. So I've got half the onion here. I'm going to do the other half in just a moment, right? A little slice escaped me, so we'll just dice that up, right? It doesn't need to be perfect. And some of this we're actually going to end up blending anyway. And we have all these different vegetables here as well. We're going to need some tomatoes for our tomato salsa. For my tomato salsa, you could use a vine-ripe tomato. Today I'm going to be using plum tomatoes. I really like that they're a bit more firm than your everyday tomato for the salsa anyway. I'm going to want the salsa to be juicy but not overly so. Right. Sometimes when you get a red onion, you see these little, they almost look like they're in like a bad spot. They're not really. It's just the skin of the onion might be a little broken. You can take that off if you want to, but you don't have to. Right? Slicing through again, and a 3rd time. And don't go too near the top of the onion as it starts to get to that cap. Right? Otherwise, you might take the top of the onion clean off, and then that makes a little bit more work for you. Right? And again, I know I've mentioned it before, but your best friend in the kitchen is a nice sharp knife. And that makes all of this so much easier. There we go. Nice minced onion. And when you're thinking size, right, it doesn't have to be exact, but this is going to be going into a salsa, and if you think about the salsas that you eat, you probably don't want giant pieces of onion on your palate, so try to keep it nice and small. All right, take the rest off of that, clean that off, a few slices, give that a little dice. Perfect. So we have plenty of red onion to get us through all these recipes, right? What we're going to end up doing for the first dish is actually the tomatillo salsa. So what I need to do at this point is preheat my broiler. And we're going to put that broiler on high, right? Because we're going to take these tomatillos, which look almost like a green tomato if you've never had one before. We're going to put them under the broiler. We're going to roast them. And I also have this long hot pepper as well. We're going to roast this too. It came from a friend of ours' garden. So we try to keep everything nice and local. So as the broiler's preheating, we're going to take a look at these tomatoes, these plum tomatoes. I like to just take the top of it off where it has the little stem, right? And since it's for a salsa, we want to dice this up nice and fine. So we're going to take that flat end, set it up, and this works well with the plum tomato again, because it's firm, but a juicier tomato, it's a little bit more tricky. Now we're going to cut this into slices. I guess I'll move this stuff out of the way. Right. So we slice that tomato, probably 1/4 inch thickness, right? Then we'll take those slices and we're going to cut them into strips. And then with those strips, we're going to turn and they become dices. Again, really nice sharp knife makes easy work of this. You could blanch these in water, boiling water if you want to, and then you could peel the skins off of them. I kind of like the firmness that the skin gives to the tomato. So we have this nice bowl here, and we'll take our diced tomato and kind of clear off our board. Take our slices and our dices. Perfect. And one last slice. And dice. Great. Okay. And look how easy. That's one tomato dispatched nice and quickly. So we're also going to be taking a look at some green bell peppers today in 2 different applications. So I think I'll use my smaller one for this with my salsa. Right. So what we're going to end up doing is taking off the top of the pepper, but I don't like to waste, so I'm going to take off those edges around the stem, and they're going to go into the salsa. And then we're going to take the core of the pepper out. You're going to see the membrane around the inside. We're just going to slice through that, put your hand right in, pull that clean out, and we want all that white membrane out of there as well. Cool. So then we're going to cut this in half. And we're going to slice nice and thinly, about the same thickness that you cut your tomatoes. And it's going to be the same exact thing as we did before. So we got our slices. And it's a little curved, so it can be a little difficult sometimes. Turn them and put them into dices, right? So when you're cutting these peppers, right, especially if you're new to cooking, what we want to do is actually make a claw with our hands and push down on all of these slices of peppers. And you're going to run that knife right along the back of your fingers. By doing that, we don't have to worry about cutting ourselves, right, and also acts as a guide. Perfect. And we've got some nice diced green bell pepper. And we're going to take this, and that's going into the bowl as well. Right. So I'm going to take care of the rest of this prep, and then we're going to get back together in just a second with our broiler, and we're going to broil some tomatillos. Alright, so we have all our ingredients in the bowl here. We've added a handful of red onion, we've got the green bell pepper, we've got the tomatoes. We're going to grab a spoon real quick. You can see my very odd drawer there with all of our silverware. And we're going to stir this up, and you want to think about color, right? A salsa's got to be green and vibrant. So, and we got the nice red there from the tomato, the technically purple of the red onion, right? So awesome. You could add some hot peppers here, like a jalapeno or something. I'm not going to bother doing that because we're going to have the hot pepper in our other salsa. And now it's time to add a little bit of cilantro. So some people don't really care for cilantro. There's a genetic predisposition that for some people it tastes like soap. So if you like cilantro, awesome. If you don't, you can always substitute parsley or a different herb that you really like, but you want a leafy green. So we're going to take a bunch of this. We're going to give it
a nice rough chop. Right, and this is probably about 2 tablespoons. You can add as much or as little as you want to. And we're just going to take that into our salsa there. Right. And then the key to this salsa to make it bright and vibrant is lime, right? All good Mexican cooking has lime. So what we're going to do is actually put some pressure on the lime and we're going to roll it on the board. And that's going to break everything up for us. And we're going to give it a slice. And then a squeeze. And we're going to use the entire lime to give this a nice acidic pop. Right. There we go. And the other half. And you want to do this first because you want to let all of these flavors marinate. The longer that you let the flavors kind of meld, the better the sauce is going to taste. And I'm just going to grab my cloth here and wipe my hands. And then the last thing we want to do is hit it with a little bit of salt and pepper. So we're just going to grab a pinch of salt. And remember, you're seasoning the entire salsa. It's okay to go a little bit heavy. And then we'll add just a little bit of black pepper, fresh cracked if you have it. And we'll give that one more stir. So, today I thought I'd go with quesadillas because last week I had coined my term Mex-Americajun. So this is the Mexican part of that. So, we've got our salsa done here. We're going to set this aside and start the next 2 steps of our process. So we have our broiler nice and hot. So what we're going to do is take our tomatillos. Right? I get mine delivered from an amazing company called Misfits Market. So they deliver organic produce that otherwise would get wasted and thrown away. So I try to support companies that are going to be supportive of limiting food waste. Right? So we're going to add just a little bit of salt to the pan. I'll talk about that in just a second. And a little bit of oil. Oh, and our long hot pepper. Right? And actually, before I do that, because I'm going to later anyway, we'll take the top off and take the core out here. Might as well do it ahead of time before they're nice and hot. Right? And then we're going to take a little bit of oil. Right? And splash that on there. Good, and then a little bit in the pan. So, we're going to try to blister these skins. So, right in the oven. And by doing so, we're going to add another level of flavor, and this is going to be a blended salsa, the tomatillo one. The other one that we did already with the tomatoes, we refer to that as a cutting board salsa because quite literally we made it on the cutting board. So, the next step here then is going to be making our black beans, and I will leave that on the back burner. So we're going to turn our burner on to medium heat and grab our can of black beans that I've already opened and I've rinsed. We want to rinse these black beans off, and they're going to go into our pot here. Right, so a nice medium-sized sauce pot. Okay. We're also going to season the beans with a pinch of salt, and again with the black pepper. And then you can go from there how you want to. You can add a little bit of cumin, which is a really popular spice in Mexican cooking. I'm actually going to add a little bit of hot sauce, and if you've ever been to a really good Mexican restaurant, you know this bottle with the nice wooden lid. Probably about a teaspoon or 2 of that. We're going to hit it with a handful of the diced red onion. Break that up and get that in there. I think I'll add just a little bit more. Okay. And then to bring it all together, we're going to add a little bit of chicken broth. So probably 1/4 cup or so. Just enough to give it a little bit of liquid to give it something to cook in. We'll get that back in the fridge. And we're going to grab a spoon and give that a stir. And let those start simmering. Right? And the black beans we can serve as a side,
or we can mash them and turn them into like a refried bean, but you'd probably want to use a pinto bean rather than a black one to do that. And we could also put it in the quesadilla, which is my intention, to replace the meat, and we'll talk about that more in a second. So what I should have mentioned, we're going to put these in the broiler for about 5 minutes per side, and we're going to flip them. So our buzzer's going to go off in a little bit. So the next thing that we're going to add to our quesadillas is going to be some more bell pepper. I like color, right? So we're going to go with an orange and a green, right? You could also use red or yellow, it doesn't matter. And the color comes from different levels of ripeness, right? There's not a drastic change in flavor. You're going to find that the green ones are a little bit more aggressive, I guess, than some of the others. Right. So, and we're actually going to take these in slices because they're going to go on the quesadillas. We're not going to bother with the dice. Okay. So you want them thin, but not too thin. I'm looking at, again, probably about 1/4 inch. And we're going to saute these a little bit to take out a bit of that firm texture and make them a little bit more pliable for our quesadillas. Right. I'm trying not to cut myself with the knife. I just sharpened it before the show, because it would be really ironic if I was talking about a sharp knife and I had a dull one. Okay. And then let's take care of this green pepper as well. Take out our core, just like we did earlier. I have a trash can here, I promise. I'm not just throwing things on the floor. And then, oh, there we go. We'll get back to this in just a second. So you want to grab a pair of tongs, right? And the broiler is really hot, so grab a good oven mitt here, and we're just going to give those a flip. You can stop beeping at me. All right, perfect. And we're going to let those go another 5 minutes. Awesome. And our beans are starting to simmer a little bit, so we're going to give them a stir. We'll watch them and we'll turn that heat down once they're at a nice roaring simmer. All right, so let's slice up this green bell pepper as well. Okay. So when it comes to the quesadilla, it's actually one of the one of the oldest foods that we're really going to take a look at on the show. They date back to the 16th century when the Spanish came over to Mexico. They had actually already been eating quesadillas, but the Spaniards brought with them cows and sheep and these dairy-bearing animals, and that introduced the Mexican people to cheese. So shortly thereafter, the quesadilla is born. Perfect. Cool. So we can do half of each of these. I think I'm going to go with the whole pepper. And if we have some leftover sauteed peppers, then we have sausage and peppers or something of the sort for a different meal. Good, good, good. Nice and thin, but not too thin. Cool. So we're going to turn the heat on a saute pan. Now we're going to put that on medium heat as well, add a little bit of oil to the pan and give that a minute to do what it needs to do. And once that oil starts moving nice and freely in the pan, then we know that the pan's going to be hot enough. And we're going to saute these peppers up to go in our quesadillas. So at this point we've launched the beans, we have the tomatillos roasting as well as the hot pepper in the oven, we have our peppers sliced, and we're going to start building that tomatillo salsa in just a minute. Alright, so we just pulled the tomatillos and the hot pepper out of the oven. You're going to see that there's this really nice black char on them, but they're not burnt, right? It's char, so we're not going to bother peeling them because we want that flavor for our salsa. So we're going to grab our blender, or in my case, again, one of my favorite gifts, the lovely Vitamix, right? And we're going to grab our tongs, come for a little journey with me, and
each of these is going to go right into the blender or the food processor, as well as our nice hot pepper. Perfect. And then we're going to grab a bunch of the cilantro. What's really important here with this salsa is that everything that we put in it is green. If we add anything that isn't green, it's going to affect the color of the final product. I think I'll grab a little bit more of the cilantro. Okay. And we don't want the stems because they're going to end up being really grainy, so we're just going to donate you to the cause. Good. So we're just going to pop the lid on here and give it its first quick blitz. Make sure that that's locked on there. So let's make a little bit of noise. And here we go. Good. All right. And we're just going to pop it up to high real quick for a nice, really quick blitz. And let's take a look in there. Look at the steam coming off of that. And that's exactly what we want to see, a nice green salsa. So we're going to end up hitting this with just a little bit of lime in a second. And then we'll season it up. So, same thing. We're going to hit the lime. We're just going to take half a lime for this one. Okay, and give it a squeeze. And we're going to pop that lid back on there. Actually, I lied. Season first. Pinch of salt. Little pepper. And on low, here we go. Let's grab a spoon and give this a taste. Again, remember it's going to be hot right now. But perfect. So the tomatillo is like a tomato, but it's tangier. So it's going to give a little bit of a zing to what we're doing. So our pan here is good. Okay, and we're going to take that temperature on the beans down. And what I did just before I turned the camera on is I lowered the oven temperature to 200 degrees. We're going to want that later to keep some of our quesadillas nice and hot. So we're going to add our peppers to the pan. I have it on a low temperature to start, so you're not hearing much sizzle just yet, because I don't want to saute these too hard right off the bat. Right, and we again season all of our food as we go. Little salt, little pepper. And we're going to give this a toss. Okay. And donate a pepper to the floor, apparently. Right. Oh, one more thing I forgot to put in the salsa. 2 cloves of garlic. So I just chopped them pretty coarsely, because the blender's going to take care of that. So let's throw these guys in. It tasted good without it, too. Alright. And we'll put it on high to make sure that do what they need to do. Great! So, there we go. Starting to hear a little sizzle on those peppers. Again, we don't want anything too hard as far as the heat. The beans are thickening up nicely, right? Because that liquid, the chicken broth, is going to reduce. But I try not to cook with water too often. When you cook with water, what you end up getting is no added flavor. So try to use something that's flavorful when you're using a liquid when the time is appropriate. So, got our peppers going, we got the beans going. We're going to let these finish sauteing. We're going to let the temperature of the oven come down. And then we're going to bring everything back together and we're going to start making some quesadillas. So it's time for us to start assembling the quesadillas. We have a big cast iron pan here that we have heating up on medium-low to medium heat. Right, just a little bit of oil in the pan. We're just letting that come up. You can see our peppers here are starting to get just a little bit of char. going to give them another few seconds to stir up. Right, and I think what we'll do is just add a little bit of that red onion to the pan as well. Let that saute for a second, a little bit more. And let's give that a toss. Right, lots of veggies. You can see how the black beans have thickened up here. There's still a little bit of liquid, right? But we have some nice hot cooked beans. The onions have given their flavor. Good. So we're just going to tilt this pan a bit, see how the oil runs nice and freely. We know that we have a nice hot pan. The reason you want to use a Dutch oven or some sort of iron pan is it's really going to retain that heat. And when we're making quesadillas, we're going to have to keep adding something to the pan, taking it out, and we don't want the temperature of the pan to fluctuate. So these are nice and simple. We're going to grab a tortilla. Right, so simple, I'm going to make it with one hand. We're going to add it to the pan. Okay, and then we have our cheese. Of course, you could fresh shred this, and I normally would if given the opportunity. However, it's my first week back teaching in New Jersey. For those of you that aren't from the U.S. and watching, try not to burn it in the pan. Obviously, the coronavirus has had an impact on us here in the U.S. pretty significantly. I am teaching in person, and my school is doing a really nice job trying to keep everybody safe. But that's why my shirt's wrinkly, because we're trying to get the school year started. So we're just going to grab a scoop of these beans. You can really make the quesadillas two ways. You could fill the entire thing and put another tortilla on there, or we can do what we're going to do, which is going to be the folding method. Alright, so we've added some beans, and I was a bagel baker for years, so I don't have a whole lot of nerves in my fingers, so I'm just going to grab some peppers with my bare hand and add them there. And we're going to keep everything on one half here, so that when we do the fold, it's going to make everything a lot easier, and we're just going to fold the cheese over onto the peppers. So I think I'm going to give this just a little bit more heat. The nice thing here as well is we've added some hot ingredients on top of the cheese. So what we're seeing is that they're going to start cooking the cheese as well and getting that melted. So just give a little bit of press. You can feel the tortillas already warming up. And in just a moment, we're going to give this a fold. So let's grab a spatula. Right, and we're just going to give, and you can see, still don't have any color there yet, so we're going to give it another minute. I'm using a whole wheat tortilla as well. I highly recommend using a fajita size or a burrito size. If you use a taco size flour tortilla shell, we're going to really be fighting with how small they are to get them folded over. If you do have that size, I would highly recommend then using 2 tortillas per quesadilla and turn it into like a stacked quesadilla. So our cheese is melting very nicely. We're going to give this our fold. And it almost looks like a really nice omelet. And we're going to give that a press. And you can see how quick this is. We're doing the entire thing live. Alright. And you can hear that little bit of sizzle, which is what we want. We're going to give this a flip in about a minute, and then we'll take it out of the pan. Alright, so it's been going about a minute. Let's take this, and we're going to be super confident and flip. And look at that color. That is perfect. So we're going to give it about another minute on this side as well. And then what we'll end up doing is taking it out of the pan, and we're going to wrap it in some foil and put it in the oven to keep it warm. And then as we keep making the quesadillas, we'll keep adding them to the foil packet in the oven. And then once we have them all done, we're going to be able to serve up a great game day appetizer. Alright, so I've got 2 quesadillas out of the oven right now, and I just can't wait any longer. I'll make the rest in a little bit. So we have our nice sharp knife, we have our quesadillas, And we're just going to take these, cut them in half, and they're going to look like little pizza slices, right? And if we've done it right, they should be ooey and cheesy and gooey and all of those lovely things that we want out of any sort of cheesy appetizer. Perfect. All right. So we'll take these. I've got my platter here. And look at this cheese, just nice and stringy, exactly what we want. We're going to plate these up. Right. Get them nice and dripping this lovely cheese. All right. So, we've got our quesadillas. These lovely vegetarian quesadillas. We're going to take a little bit of the cilantro here. And we're just going to chop that up nice and roughly. There we go. Sprinkle that on top. We have that other half of the lime. And we'll cut that into some nice wedges. Okay. And we'll plate them like so. And then we have our salsas. So we have the tomato salsa here. You can get these little salsa cups actually at the dollar store. So this is nice and marinated. We're going to give this a quick stir to get that lime juice running throughout. And we'll plate that up. And just right on the platter. And then we have the tomatillo salsa. Which again is a blender salsa, so it's nice and liquid. And we'll plate that there as well. And we have a game day feast. So we're getting right down in here. You can see how gooey the cheese is melting, and those black beans and the peppers are just kind of spilling out. We have this beautiful green consistency of the tomatillo salsa and that vibrant freshness of the cutting board tomato salsa. So the only thing left to do is dig in. So we're going to grab this piece of quesadilla, hit it with a little bit of that tomatillo salsa, a little bit of that cutting board salsa. You could of course use one or the other if you wanted to. Hit it with a little lime. And then I always like things nice and spicy, so we'll hit it with a little bit of Mexican hot sauce as well. Maybe a little too much. And let's go. So we're getting the tang from the tomatillos, as well as that acidic brightness from the salsa and the extra lime juice. I didn't use too much hot sauce. This was perfect. And then you get the creaminess of the cheese, as well as the beans and the quesadilla. And there's still a little bit of crunch coming, not only from the red onion and the salsa, but the bell peppers and the quesadilla as well. Man, it's taking everything in me not to have another bite. So I'll have to wrap this thing up quickly. If you haven't done so already, follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel as well as the video if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you guys next week for another game day feast.